The precipice was a silent promise etched in stone, a dramatic drop that plunged into the heart of the Emerald Valley below. From this vantage point, the world unfurled like a meticulously painted tapestry, stitched together with verdant fields, silver ribbons of rivers, and the quaint, toy-like villages that dotted the landscape. This was the Vista del Fuego, a location famed not only for its unparalleled beauty but also for its rather unforgiving geography. The air, thin and crisp at this altitude, carried the faint scent of pine and the distant murmur of the wind whistling through the crags. The attraction's popularity was undeniable. A steady stream of tourists, a kaleidoscope of languages and nationalities, flowed through the designated viewing areas. Each face held a mixture of awe and healthy respect for the chasm that yawned before them. But the Vista del Fuego wasn't merely a place of scenic wonder. It was a place of carefully enforced rules. The authorities, well aware of the potential dangers, had implemented strict safety regulations. These regulations weren't arbitrary. They were born from experience, from unfortunate incidents that served as stark reminders of the power of nature and the folly of underestimating it. Dominating the immediate foreground was a robust barrier system. Far from being an afterthought, these barriers were meticulously designed and strategically placed. Constructed from sturdy, weather-resistant materials, they were more than just ropes or flimsy fences. They were a clear, physical demarcation, a line in the sand that separated the realm of safety from the realm of risk. Bright yellow paint screamed a warning against the gray stone, a color scheme chosen for maximum visibility and reinforced by reflective tape that glinted even in the muted light of overcast days. Affixed to the barriers, at regular intervals, were a series of signs. These weren't just small, easily overlooked notices. They were large, boldly lettered warnings, translated into at least 6 different languages: English, Spanish, French, German, Mandarin, and Japanese, ensuring that the message was universally understood. Danger, extreme drop, stay behind the barrier. Violators will be prosecuted. Pictograms reinforced the written warnings. A stick figure tumbling over a cliff edge, a stark and unambiguous image. The signs were illuminated at night, ensuring that the message remained visible even after dusk. Beyond the signs and barriers, adding another layer of security, were the guards. They were not intimidating figures, but they were undeniably present, their uniforms a reassuring symbol of authority. They were trained to be vigilant, to observe, and to intervene when necessary. Their job was not just to enforce the rules but to ensure the safety of every visitor, a responsibility they took seriously. They patrolled the viewing areas with a practiced eye, scanning the crowd for any signs of recklessness or disregard for the regulations. They were polite and helpful, answering questions and offering assistance, but they were also firm and unwavering when it came to safety. They had seen it all before: the thrill-seekers, the selfie-obsessed, the clueless tourists who wandered too close to the edge, and they knew that a moment's inattention could have devastating consequences. The Vista del Fuego was beautiful, but it demanded respect, and the guards were there to ensure it received it. The air, thick with anticipation of a potential disaster, was soon to be disrupted by the arrival of one particular tourist. She emerged from the throng of sightseers like a brightly colored, slightly out-of-place tropical bird amidst a flock of more somberly dressed pigeons. Her name, fittingly, was Karen. Karen's attire was a declaration in itself. Pristine white sneakers that looked utterly impractical for the rocky terrain, designer sunglasses perched atop her head pushing back meticulously styled, highlighted blonde hair, and a vibrant floral print dress that seemed more suited for a beachside resort than a mountaintop vista. A large, expensive-looking handbag swung from her shoulder, adding to the overall impression of someone who expected the world to cater to her every whim. Her demeanor was equally striking. Even before she reached the prime viewing spot, a low hum of complaint seemed to emanate from her. She wrinkled her nose at the crowd. Even though it was a relatively moderate gathering, she sighed dramatically as she waited her turn to approach the barrier, tapping her foot impatiently. The faint but unmistakable air of entitlement clung to her like an expensive perfume. Her initial interactions offered further clues to her character. Honestly, she muttered to her companion, a long-suffering-looking man who appeared to be her husband. You'd think they could organize this better. All these people crammed together. It's hardly a relaxing vacation experience. Her husband, whose name was probably something equally unremarkable like Bob, simply nodded wearily, seemingly accustomed to these pronouncements. As they finally reached the front, Karen's complaints escalated. "Ugh, this barrier is so annoying," she declared, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by those nearby. "It completely ruins the view that I can barely see anything through these ridiculous metal bars." She peered through the gaps, her expression sour. "Honestly, who designed this place? It's like they don't want you to enjoy the scenery." She then turned her attention to a nearby information board. "And these maps are useless. Where's the best spot for a photo? They should have marked it clearly." She scanned the board with a dismissive air, as if personally offended by its lack of specific instructions tailored to her needs. Bob, meanwhile, busied himself with his phone, seemingly trying to become invisible. The first real hint of her disregard for rules came when she spotted a small, seemingly insignificant sign that read, "Do not place bags on the barrier." Without a moment's hesitation, she hoisted her expensive handbag onto the metal railing, completely obscuring the warning. "It's just for a second," she muttered to herself, rummaging through the bag for her phone. "I need to find my selfie stick." This seemingly minor act, a flagrant disregard for a clearly posted rule, was a harbinger of things to come. It was a small crack in the facade of civility, a glimpse into a mindset that prioritized personal convenience over the safety and consideration of others. The stage was set, Karen had arrived, and the Vista del Fuego was about to experience a test of its carefully crafted safety measures. The low grumbling of Karen's complaints continued to fill the air, a discordant note in the symphony of the Vista, while Karen continued to orchestrate her personal drama, oblivious to the world around her. The Vista del Fuego hummed with the quiet diligence of those who understood and respected its boundaries. The numerous warning signs, which she had so readily dismissed, stood as silent sentinels, their messages amplified by the very air of caution that permeated the area. Each sign, a testament to past incidents and a plea for future prudence, served as a stark reminder of the potential consequences of recklessness. The multilingual aspect of the warnings was particularly striking. The English phrases were mirrored by their equivalents in Spanish, German, French, Mandarin, and Japanese, each language carrying the same urgent message of caution. It was a deliberate effort to ensure that no visitor, regardless of their origin or linguistic ability, could claim ignorance of the risks. The pictograms, too, transcended language barriers, depicting the stark reality of a fall with brutal simplicity. The security guards, ever watchful, were also a constant presence, their keen eyes scanning the crowd for any signs of trouble. They moved with a quiet confidence, their uniforms a subtle reminder of their authority. They were not there to intimidate, but to protect, their presence a reassurance to those who understood the importance of safety. They were trained to identify potential risks, to anticipate problems before they arose, and to intervene swiftly and decisively when necessary. They had seen it all before. The daredevils, the attention-seekers, the simply clueless tourists who underestimated the dangers of the Vista del Fuego, in stark contrast to Karen's behavior. The majority of the other tourists demonstrated a commendable respect for the rules. Families held onto their children tightly, ensuring they stayed well behind the barrier. Couples posed for photos, carefully framing their shots to avoid any suggestion of trespassing. Solo travelers stood in quiet contemplation, absorbing the beauty of the vista without feeling the need to push the boundaries. There was a palpable sense of shared understanding among these visitors, a collective recognition of the inherent risks and the importance of adhering to the safety regulations. They spoke in hushed tones, their voices respectful of the power of the landscape. They moved with caution, mindful of their surroundings. They were, in short, the antithesis of Karen. One young woman, a backpacker from Germany, even politely corrected a fellow tourist who had inadvertently leaned against the barrier. "Excuse me," she said in clear English, "but it's not allowed to touch the fence. It is for safety." The tourist, initially surprised, quickly apologized and stepped back, visibly embarrassed by his unintentional transgression. This small act of collective responsibility highlighted the prevailing attitude of respect and caution that permeated the Vista del Fuego. The scene was thus set. A breathtaking vista, a clearly defined boundary, a vigilant security presence, a crowd of respectful tourists, and Karen, a disruptive force seemingly determined to challenge the established order. The tension in the air was almost palpable, a sense of anticipation hanging heavy over the landscape. It was only a matter of time before the inevitable clash occurred, a confrontation between Karen's entitlement and the unwavering commitment to safety that defined the vista. Del Fuego. The stage was set for a showdown. The stage was set, the players in position. All that remained was the inevitable act. Karen, fueled by a potent cocktail of entitlement and a desperate need for the perfect Instagram photo, began to escalate her challenge to the established order of the Vista del Fuego. Her initial tactic was one of verbal assault, a relentless questioning of the barrier's very existence. "I just don't understand why this thing is even here," she huffed, directing her complaints to Bob, who remained firmly entrenched in his phone. "It's completely ruining my shot. How am I supposed to get a decent picture with this ugly metal thing in the way?" She circled the barrier like a predator sizing up its prey, her eyes scanning for any weakness, any opportunity to circumvent its authority. She poked and prodded at the metal bars, as if testing their strength. "It's not even that sturdy," she muttered, her voice laced with disdain. "I bet I could just move it." She then began to voice her concerns about the obstruction it caused to her vision. "I came all this way to see the view, not to stare at a metal fence," she complained, her voice rising in pitch. "This is false advertising, I tell you." They should have mentioned the giant barrier in the brochures. The next step was a more direct challenge to the barrier's integrity. Karen began to subtly, almost imperceptibly, attempt to move it. She leaned against it, applying gentle pressure, as if accidentally bumping into it. When that failed to produce any results, she tried to wedge her fingers into the gaps between the metal bars, attempting to pry them apart. "It's so inconvenient," she grumbled, her face contorted in frustration. "I just need to move it a little bit, just enough to get a clear shot." Bob, finally emerging from his digital cocoon, offered a feeble protest. "Karen, maybe you should just leave it," he mumbled, his voice barely audible above the wind. "There are signs, you know." Karen shot him a look that could curdle milk. "Don't be ridiculous, Bob," she snapped. "I know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to get a decent picture. You'd think they'd appreciate it. I'm practically giving them free advertising." Failing to move the barrier, Karen then shifted her focus to finding a way to squeeze through it. She examined the gaps between the posts, her eyes calculating whether she could fit her frame through the narrow openings. She tried to contort her body, twisting and turning in an effort to squeeze past the metal bars. "It's a bit tight," she admitted, her voice strained. "But I think I can make it." She sucked in her stomach, pushed her chest forward, and attempted to wriggle her way through the opening. The fabric of her floral dress snagged on the metal, adding to her frustration. The nearby security guard, who had been discreetly observing Karen's antics, began to move closer. He knew that it was only a matter of time before she crossed the line. Both literally and figuratively. The other tourists, too, were beginning to take notice, their eyes fixed on Karen with a mixture of amusement and apprehension. The tension in the air thickened, the anticipation reaching a fever pitch. The showdown was imminent. The air crackled with unspoken disapproval that Karen's antics had not gone unnoticed. The other tourists, initially amused by her antics, were now growing increasingly concerned. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, a chorus of hushed voices expressing their dismay. A young couple exchanged worried glances, while an elderly woman shook her head in disapproval. Even Bob, usually content to remain in the background, seemed to be growing increasingly anxious. The security guard, a middle-aged man named Miguel with a weathered face and an air of quiet authority, had seen enough. He approached Karen with a calm but firm demeanor. His eyes, though kind, held a steely glint that suggested he was not to be trifled with. "Excuse me, madam," Miguel said, his voice polite but unwavering. "I must ask you to refrain from attempting to move or bypass the barrier. It is there for your safety and the safety of others." Karen, startled by the interruption, spun around, her face contorted in a mixture of anger and indignation. "I'm not doing anything wrong," she retorted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'm just trying to get a decent picture. This barrier is ruining everything." Miguel remained impassive. "I understand your frustration, madam," he replied, "but the rules are clear. You must stay behind the barrier at all times. The drop is very dangerous. Karen scoffed. I know my limits, she declared, her voice rising in pitch. I'm not stupid. I'm perfectly capable of taking a picture without falling off the cliff. She punctuated her statement with a dismissive wave of her hand. Miguel's expression remained unchanged. With all due respect, madam, he said, it is not a matter of intelligence. Accidents can happen to anyone. The barrier is there to prevent such accidents. Karen rolled her eyes. Oh, please, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Don't treat me like a child. I'm an adult. I can make my own decisions. She turned her back on Miguel and resumed her attempts to squeeze through the barrier. Miguel sighed inwardly that he had encountered this type of tourist before. Arrogant, entitled, and convinced of their own infallibility, that he knew that reasoning with her was futile. He had given her a verbal warning, as required by protocol. Now, he would have to take more direct action if she continued to disregard the rules. The other tourists watched the exchange with bated breath. They knew that a confrontation was inevitable. They could sense the tension in the air, the unspoken challenge between Karen's defiance and Miguel's unwavering commitment to safety. The stage was set for a dramatic showdown. The Vista del Fuego held its breath, ignoring Miguel's warning as if it were nothing more than an annoying buzz of a mosquito. Karen took a deep breath, a look of determined defiance etched on her face. It was a performance, a deliberate act of rebellion against the perceived constraints of the Vista del Fuego. She was going to have her picture, and no flimsy barrier was going to stop her. With a swift, almost theatrical movement, she hoisted one leg over the lowest bar of the barrier. The floral print of her dress billowed slightly in the wind, a splash of color against the stark gray of the metal. She paused for a moment, as if savoring the attention, then swung her other leg over, completing the crossing. She was now on the wrong side of the barrier, standing precariously close to the edge of the cliff. The wind whipped around her, tugging at her dress and threatening to dislodge her sunglasses. The drop below was dizzying, a sheer fall into the emerald depths of the valley. The crowd gasped at a collective intake of breath, a sound that echoed across the Vista del Fuego. The sound wasn't just surprise, it was laced with genuine fear. They knew the danger, they understood the risks. They had seen the warning signs, they had heard the stories. And now, they were witnessing someone deliberately putting themselves in harm's way. Karen, oblivious to the fear she had instilled in the hearts of the onlookers, struck a pose. She turned her back to the edge, her arms outstretched, her face tilted towards the sky. It was a pose of triumphant defiance, a declaration of her victory over the barrier and the rules it represented. Bob, his face pale with terror, stammered, Karen, what are you doing? Get back over here. It's not safe. His voice was barely audible above the wind, a desperate plea lost in the vastness of the landscape. Karen ignored him. Take the picture, Bob, she commanded, her voice sharp and impatient. And make sure you get the whole view in. This is going to be epic. Bob, reluctantly, raised his phone and snapped a quick photo. His hands were shaking, his eyes darting nervously between Karen and the edge of the cliff. He wanted to get her back to safety as quickly as possible. Karen, satisfied with the photo, struck another pose, this time leaning slightly backwards, her body arching towards the edge. It was a calculated risk, a deliberate attempt to push the boundaries of danger. The crowd gasped again, their fear intensifying. They could see the potential for disaster, the possibility of a tragic accident. They knew that one wrong step, one gust of wind, could send Karen tumbling over the edge. Miguel, his face grim, began to move towards her. He knew that he had to act quickly. He could not allow her to remain in such a dangerous position for even a moment longer. The situation had escalated beyond a simple violation of the rules. It was now a matter of life and death. The tension was unbearable. Miguel moved with a speed that belied his age and a precision honed by years of experience. There was no hesitation in his movements, no second-guessing. He knew exactly what he had to do, and he did it with a calm efficiency that was both reassuring and impressive. He approached Karen from the side, his footsteps light and silent on the rocky ground. He didn't shout. He didn't panic. He simply acted, his movements deliberate and controlled. His primary concern was Karen's safety, and every action he took was geared towards ensuring that she was not harmed. With a swift, fluid motion. Miguel reached out and grasped Karen firmly by the arm. His grip was strong, but not painful. He wasn't trying to hurt her. He was trying to protect her. He used his other hand to gently guide her waist, providing additional support and stability. Then, in one seamless movement, he pivoted her around and lifted her back over the barrier. It wasn't a forceful shove. It wasn't a violent push. It was a controlled maneuver. A carefully executed technique designed to minimize the risk of injury. He practically flipped her. But the word felt too harsh, too uncontrolled for the practiced grace he displayed. It was more like a guided rotation. A firm but gentle redirection back to safety. The entire action took only a few seconds, a blur of motion that was over almost as quickly as it began. But in those few seconds, Miguel had averted a potential disaster. He had taken control of the situation. He had neutralized the threat, and he had done it all without causing any harm to Karen. As he set her back down on the safe side of the barrier, Miguel maintained his grip on her arm, ensuring that she was steady on her feet. He looked her in the eye, his expression stern but not unkind. "Madam," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I must insist that you remain behind the barrier at all times. Your safety is our priority. We do not want anyone to get hurt." He then released her arm, stepping back slightly to give her some space. He watched her carefully, making sure that she understood the gravity of the situation. The entire action was a testament to Miguel's training, his experience, and his unwavering commitment to safety. He had acted swiftly, decisively, and with a remarkable degree of control. He had prioritized Karen's safety above all else, and he had managed to avert a potential tragedy. It was a textbook example of how to handle a difficult situation with grace and professionalism. The crowd watched, stunned into silence by the speed and efficiency of Miguel's actions. The silence that followed Miguel's swift intervention was broken by a spontaneous eruption of cheers and applause. The crowd, which had been holding its breath in anticipation of disaster, released its collective tension in a wave of relief and appreciation. The applause started slowly, a hesitant ripple that quickly grew into a thunderous ovation. People clapped their hands, stamped their feet, and whistled their approval. The sound echoed across the Vista del Fuego, a resounding endorsement of Miguel's actions and a clear condemnation of Karen's recklessness. The cheers weren't just for Miguel's skill and efficiency. They were also an expression of gratitude. Gratitude that he had prevented a tragedy, gratitude that he had upheld the rules, and gratitude that he had restored a sense of order and safety to the Vista del Fuego. There was also a sense of collective vindication. The crowd had witnessed Karen's blatant disregard for the rules, her arrogance, and her entitlement. They had felt powerless to intervene. But now, Miguel had acted on their behalf, restoring a sense of justice and fairness to the situation. In the digital age, no event is truly complete until it's been captured and shared online. As the applause continued, several tourists pulled out their phones and began filming the aftermath of the incident. They zoomed in on Miguel, capturing his calm and composed demeanor. They panned across the crowd, showcasing the expressions of relief and appreciation. And, of course, they focused on Karen, recording her reaction to the unexpected turn of events. The videos were quickly uploaded to social media, accompanied by captions that ranged from humorous to outraged. "Karen gets owned by security guard," read one caption. "Entitled tourist learns a valuable lesson," declared another. The videos quickly went viral, spreading across the internet and generating a flurry of comments and shares. The incident became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the importance of respecting rules and the consequences of arrogance and entitlement. It also turned Miguel into an unlikely hero, a symbol of competence, integrity, and unwavering commitment to safety. Back at the Vista del Fuego, the applause began to subside, but the sense of relief and satisfaction lingered in the air. The crowd dispersed slowly, buzzing with conversation about what they had just witnessed. They had been part of something extraordinary, something that they would remember for a long time to come. The Vista del Fuego had returned to normal, but it had been forever changed by the events of that day. For a brief, fleeting moment, Karen was stunned. The swiftness of Miguel's action, the unexpected loss of control, and the sudden wave of cheers had left her momentarily speechless. Her eyes widened in shock, and a flicker of embarrassment crossed her face. Perhaps, for the first time, She realized the extent of her recklessness and the potential consequences of her actions, but the moment passed quickly. The embarrassment was soon replaced by a surge of anger and indignation. How dare this security guard, this peasant, lay his hands on her? How dare he interrupt her photo shoot and make her look foolish in front of all these people? The cheers of the crowd only fueled her rage, confirming her belief that she had been wronged. "What do you think you're doing?" she shrieked, her voice piercing the air. "You assaulted me. You can't just go around grabbing people like that." She glared at Miguel, her eyes blazing with fury. Miguel remained calm and composed, his expression unchanged. "Madam," he said, his voice even and controlled, "I acted in your best interest. You were in a dangerous situation, and I needed to remove you from harm's way." Karen scoffed. "Dangerous? I was perfectly safe. I know my limits. You had no right to touch me." She pointed a finger at Miguel, her hand shaking with anger. "I demand to speak to a manager. I'm going to report you. You're going to lose your job." She turned to the crowd, seeking validation for her outrage. "Did you see what he did?" she demanded, her voice trembling with indignation. "He just grabbed me and threw me over the barrier. That's assault. I could have been seriously injured." But the crowd was not on her side. They had witnessed her reckless behavior, her blatant disregard for the rules, and her arrogance. They had seen Miguel act swiftly and decisively to prevent a potential tragedy. They were not about to sympathize with her now. Some of the tourists even began to heckle her. "You deserved it," shouted one man. "You were putting yourself in danger," yelled another. The heckling only fueled Karen's rage, confirming her belief that she was being unfairly targeted. "This is outrageous," she screamed, her voice cracking with emotion. "I'm going to sue this place. I'm going to make sure you all pay for this." She stomped her foot on the ground, her face contorted in anger. Bob, who had been silent throughout the entire ordeal, finally spoke up. "Karen, maybe you should just calm down," he said, his voice barely audible. "Maybe we should just go." Karen rounded on him, her eyes flashing with fury. "Don't tell me to calm down, Bob," she snapped. "This is your fault. If you had just taken the picture properly, none of this would have happened." She turned back to Miguel, her voice dripping with venom. "I'm not going to let you get away with this," she said. "I'm going to make your life a living hell. You just wait and see." With that, she stormed off towards the visitor center, determined to find a manager and unleash her fury on anyone who stood in her way. The crowd watched her go, shaking their heads in disbelief. The Karen show was far from over. A few minutes later, a figure emerged from the visitor center, summoned by Karen's escalating demands. It was Mr. Rodriguez, the manager of the Vista del Fuego, a man known for his calm demeanor and his ability to defuse even the most volatile situations. He approached the scene with a measured pace, his expression neutral, his eyes scanning the crowd and taking in the situation. Karen, seeing him approach, rushed forward, her voice rising in pitch. "Finally," she exclaimed, "I demand that you take action against this man. He assaulted me. He grabbed me and threw me over the barrier." Mr. Rodriguez listened patiently, his expression unwavering. He allowed Karen to vent her anger, to express her outrage, without interruption. He knew that it was important to allow her to feel heard, even if he didn't agree with her version of events. When Karen finally paused for breath, Mr. Rodriguez spoke, his voice calm and measured. "Madam," he said, "I understand that you are upset. However, I have spoken with Mr. Miguel, and I have also reviewed the security footage. Based on what I have seen, I believe that Mr. Miguel acted appropriately and in accordance with our safety regulations." He then proceeded to calmly and methodically explain the safety regulations of the Vista del Fuego, emphasizing the importance of staying behind the barrier and the potential dangers of disregarding the rules. He pointed out the numerous warning signs, the multilingual translations, and the clear instructions that were provided to all visitors. He then explained the reason for Miguel's actions, emphasizing that he had acted to prevent a potential accident and to ensure Karen's safety. He pointed out that Karen had deliberately crossed the barrier, despite being warned not to do so, and that she had placed herself in a dangerous situation. Mr. Miguel's primary responsibility is to ensure the safety of all our visitors, Mr. Rodriguez explained. He acted quickly and decisively to remove you from harm's way. I commend him for his professionalism and his commitment to safety. He then turned to Miguel, offering him a nod of approval. Thank you, Miguel, he said. You did a good job. The crowd erupted in applause once again, their approval of Mr. Rodriguez's words echoing across the Vista del Fuego. They had been impressed by his calm demeanor, his fairness, and his unwavering support for his employee. They knew that he had made the right decision, and they appreciated his willingness to stand up to Karen's entitlement and arrogance. Karen, however, was not satisfied. This is ridiculous, she shrieked. You're taking his side. You're not even going to listen to me? Mr. Rodriguez sighed inwardly. He had dealt with countless difficult customers over the years, but Karen was proving to be particularly challenging. He knew that reasoning with her was likely to be futile, but he felt obligated to try. Madam, he said, his voice patient but firm, I have listened to you, I have considered your concerns, but I cannot condone your behavior. You deliberately disregarded our safety regulations, and you placed yourself in a dangerous situation. I cannot and will not support your actions. Karen, unable to accept responsibility for her actions, launched into a renewed and even more fervent outburst. The word outburst hardly seemed adequate to describe the torrent of accusations, complaints, and increasingly outlandish claims that spewed forth from her. This is all your fault, she shrieked, pointing a finger at Mr. Rodriguez. If you had better security, this wouldn't have happened. That barrier is a joke. It's practically begging people to climb over it. She then turned her attention to Miguel, her voice dripping with venom. And you're just a bully. You enjoy hurting people. You probably get off on it. She even blamed Bob, who had been trying his best to remain invisible throughout the entire ordeal. And you're useless. You can't even take a decent picture. This is all your fault for not capturing my good side. Her claims became increasingly bizarre and detached from reality. I have a medical condition, she declared, clutching her chest dramatically. I have a rare form of vertigo. That barrier was triggering my symptoms. You're discriminating against me. She then accused the Vista del Fuego of being a conspiracy designed to ruin her vacation. This is all a setup, she exclaimed. You're trying to sabotage me. You're jealous of my beauty and my success. She even claimed that the security guard had deliberately targeted her because of her race and gender. This is a hate crime, she shrieked. I'm being victimized because I'm a woman. You're all a bunch of misogynists. The crowd, which had initially been amused by her antics, began to grow weary of her increasingly outlandish claims. Some of the tourists rolled their eyes, while others simply shook their heads in disbelief. Even Bob seemed to be reaching his breaking point. His face a mask of exhaustion and despair, Mr. Rodriguez, who had been trying his best to remain calm and professional, began to lose his patience. He had dealt with countless difficult customers over the years, but Karen was proving to be particularly challenging. He knew that reasoning with her was futile, but he felt obligated to try one last time. Madam, he said, his voice firm but measured, I must ask you to stop making these unfounded accusations. You are being disrespectful to my staff and to the other visitors. If you continue to behave in this manner, I will be forced to ask you to leave the premises. But Karen was beyond reason. She was trapped in a self-perpetuating cycle of anger, entitlement, and denial. She refused to accept responsibility for her actions, blaming everyone else and making increasingly outlandish claims in an attempt to justify her behavior. The Karen show was reaching its climax. Mr. Rodriguez, having reached the limits of his patience and understanding, signaled to two other security guards who had arrived to assist. They approached Karen with a professional but firm demeanor, their presence a clear indication that her behavior had crossed the line. Madam, Mr. Rodriguez said, his voice devoid of emotion, I must ask you to leave the premises. You are disturbing the peace and disrupting the enjoyment of other visitors. If you refuse to comply, we will be forced to call the authorities. Karen, realizing that she had finally pushed things too far, seemed to deflate slightly. The fire in her eyes dimmed, and her voice lost some of its shrillness, however. She still refused to back down completely. "This is outrageous," she muttered, her voice barely audible. "I'm being treated unfairly. I'm going to report you to the authorities." The security guards, unfazed by her threats, gently but firmly took her by the arms and began to escort her towards the exit. Karen resisted slightly. But her resistance was half-hearted. She knew that she had lost, that there was no point in continuing the fight as she was being led away. She shot one last venomous glance at Miguel, her eyes filled with hatred. "You haven't heard the last of this," she hissed. "I'm going to make you pay." Bob, who had been trailing behind her like a lost puppy throughout the entire ordeal, finally spoke up. "Karen, please," he said, his voice pleading. "Just let it go. Let's just go home." Karen ignored him, focusing her anger and resentment on the security guards who were escorting her away as they reached the exit. Mr. Rodriguez handed her a written warning, outlining the reasons for her expulsion and informing her that she was no longer welcome at the Vista del Fuego. Depending on the local laws, a minor fine for disturbing the peace might have been included as well. With a final glare, Karen stormed out of the attraction, leaving behind a trail of resentment and ill will. Bob followed her sheepishly, his head hung low, his face a picture of utter despair as Karen disappeared from sight. The crowd erupted in applause once again, their cheers a resounding expression of relief and satisfaction. They had witnessed the final act of the Karen show, and they were glad to see it come to an end. The crowd began to disperse slowly, buzzing with conversation about what they had just witnessed. They rehashed the details of the incident, sharing their opinions and offering their own interpretations of Karen's behavior. The incident had provided them with a shared experience, a common point of reference that they would remember for a long time to come. The Vista del Fuego slowly returned to normal, the only evidence of the Karen show being the lingering sense of relief and the shared memory of a truly extraordinary event. As the last echoes of the crowd's applause faded away, Miguel quietly returned to his post. He straightened his uniform, adjusted his hat, and resumed his watchful gaze over the Vista del Fuego. To an outside observer, he might have appeared completely unfazed by the events that had just transpired. But beneath his calm exterior, Miguel was far from indifferent. He had witnessed countless incidents like this over the years. Tourists who disregarded the rules, underestimated the dangers, and placed themselves and others at risk. He had seen the consequences of recklessness firsthand, the tragic accidents that had scarred the landscape and the lives of those involved. He knew that his job was more than just enforcing rules and issuing warnings. It was about protecting people, about preventing tragedies, about ensuring that everyone who visited the Vista del Fuego could enjoy its beauty safely. He had learned to recognize the warning signs, the subtle cues that indicated someone was about to cross the line. He had developed a sixth sense for danger, an ability to anticipate problems before they arose. He had honed his skills through years of experience, learning how to de-escalate tense situations, how to communicate effectively, and how to act swiftly and decisively when necessary. He understood that most people didn't intentionally set out to cause trouble. They were simply caught up in the moment, blinded by their own desires or ignorant of the risks. But he also knew that good intentions were not enough. Rules were in place for a reason, and it was his responsibility to enforce them, regardless of the consequences. He wasn't immune to the insults and accusations that were often hurled his way. He had been called names, he had been threatened, and he had been accused of all sorts of wrongdoing. But he had learned to develop a thick skin, to ignore the negativity and to focus on the task at hand. He knew that he couldn't please everyone. He knew that some people would always resent him for enforcing the rules, for interfering with their plans, for telling them what to do. But he also knew that he was doing the right thing, that he was making a difference, that he was helping to keep people safe. As he stood there, gazing out over the vista, he felt a sense of pride in his work. He was a guardian of the Vista del Fuego, a protector of its visitors, a defender of its rules. He was Miguel, the security guard, and he was dedicated to ensuring everyone's safety. The wind whipped around him, carrying the scent of pine and the distant murmur of the valley below. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever the day might bring. There would be other tourists, other rule breakers, other challenges. But he was ready. He was always ready. The incident at the Vista del Fuego served as a potent reminder of several important truths. It was a microcosm of larger societal issues, a stage upon which fundamental principles were tested and ultimately reaffirmed. The most glaring theme was, of course, The issue of entitlement. Karen's behavior was a textbook example of someone who believed that rules and regulations didn't apply to her, that her personal desires trumped the safety and well-being of others. This sense of entitlement, this belief that she was somehow special or deserving of preferential treatment, was the root cause of her reckless actions and her subsequent refusal to accept responsibility. The story also highlighted the crucial importance of respecting rules. Rules are not arbitrary restrictions imposed by authority figures to stifle individual freedom. They are essential guidelines designed to ensure the safety, order, and fairness of society. In the case of the Vista del Fuego, the rules were in place to protect visitors from a very real and potentially deadly danger. Disregarding those rules was not only irresponsible but also selfish, as it placed both Karen herself and others at risk. Furthermore, the incident underscored the importance of listening to those in positions of authority, particularly when safety is concerned. Miguel was not just a security guard. He was a trained professional with years of experience in assessing risks and managing potentially dangerous situations. When he warned Karen about the dangers of crossing the barrier, he was not simply trying to assert his authority. He was trying to protect her from harm. By dismissing his warnings and asserting her own knowledge of her limits, Karen demonstrated a dangerous level of arrogance and a profound lack of respect for expertise and authority. Ultimately, the story of Karen at the Vista del Fuego was a story about the triumph of common sense and collective responsibility over individual entitlement and reckless disregard for the rules. It was a reminder that we all have a role to play in ensuring the safety and well-being of our communities, and that respecting authority, heeding warnings, and following established guidelines are essential for creating a safe and harmonious society. The cheers of the crowd, the unwavering support of Mr. Rodriguez, and the quiet dedication of Miguel all served as a powerful affirmation of these fundamental values. The world needs more Miguels, willing to stand up for what's right, even in the face of entitlement and arrogance. And perhaps, just perhaps, even Karen learned a valuable lesson that day, a lesson about humility, respect, and the importance of following the rules. Once again, silence settled over the Vista del Fuego, a silence different from the tense anticipation that had preceded Karen's arrival. This silence was imbued with a sense of peace, a renewed appreciation for the beauty and the inherent dangers of the landscape. The breathtaking view, which had been temporarily overshadowed by the drama of the Karen show, now reclaimed its rightful place as the focal point. The Emerald Valley stretched out below, bathed in the soft glow of the afternoon sun. The silver ribbons of rivers snaked through the landscape, reflecting the light like shimmering threads. The distant villages nestled in the hills, their quaint charm a testament to the enduring power of nature and human ingenuity. But now, the view was appreciated with a deeper understanding, a heightened awareness of the importance of respecting the boundaries and the rules that were in place to protect those who came to admire it. The barriers, which had once seemed like an annoying obstruction, now stood as a reassuring symbol of safety and responsibility. The warning signs, which had been so readily dismissed by Karen, now seemed even more relevant, their messages amplified by the events that had just transpired. The pictograms depicting the stick figure tumbling over the cliff edge carried a new weight, a stark reminder of the potential consequences of recklessness. Even the wind seemed to whisper a cautionary tale, a reminder of the power of nature and the importance of heeding its warnings. The Vista del Fuego was beautiful, but it was also unforgiving. It demanded respect, and it rewarded those who approached it with humility and caution. The incident with Karen had been a disruption, a temporary detour from the path of peaceful appreciation. But it had also served as a valuable lesson, a reminder of the importance of shared responsibility, respect for authority, and the triumph of common sense over individual entitlement. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the valley, the Vista del Fuego was once again a place of quiet contemplation and profound beauty. The tourists who remained stood in silent awe, their eyes fixed on the breathtaking panorama before them. They had witnessed something extraordinary, something that would stay with them long after they had left, and perhaps, as they gazed out over the vista, they also reflected on the broader themes that the incident had highlighted: the dangers of entitlement, the importance of respecting rules, and the need to listen to those in positions of authority, especially when safety is concerned. The final shot lingered on one of the warning signs, the multilingual translations gleaming in the fading light. Danger, extreme drop, stay behind the barrier. Violators will be prosecuted. The message was clear, unambiguous, and utterly relevant. The Vista del Fuego was a place of beauty, but it was also a place of danger, and respecting the rules was the key to enjoying its wonders safely. The story ends where it began, but with a deepened understanding of the delicate balance between beauty, danger, and responsibility.